Hello everybody, this is Mike Sorg. This is our first edition of Doc Talk. It's going to be our podcast here at Sinclair.com. Glad all you could join us. And it's our test. This is our test case. If you're hearing this means the test went well.
Testing 1 2 1 2.
Yes, exactly. I'm Mike Sorg. I'm the Director of Web Media here at Sinclair. You might have seen me tweeting a bit. And with us is Tirzah Mason. And tell people what you do.
Well, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist at Persoma PC and also at Sinclair. So that's what I'm here for. I guess I'm the doc stand-in today.
And also, Jonas Cheney is joining us. Now, tell us what you do.
I'm a community affairs director at an NBC affiliate and a freelance journalist.
Excellent. So the topic today is...
nature deficit disorder.
It's a mouthful.
It is. Yeah, it is. And I wondered as I was checking all this stuff out why he used the term nature deficit disorder. This comes from a fellow named Richard Louv, or Louv, L-O-U-V is his name, and he wrote a book about 6 years ago called Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. It seems kind of funny to call it a disorder, but that was his impression after talking to hundreds of people throughout the country in terms of looking at how children interact or don't interact with nature. And he came up with that idea. I think it's kind of funny that things only get our attention when we phrase them in terms of disorders. We're so concerned about the ways in which we aren't functioning that sometimes we forget about the ways we are.
How long has this malady been around?
Well, I don't think it's really, it is a malady in a sense. What he's saying is that, I think looking at, here's an interesting empirical piece of data that he says that measuring the radius kids tend to go away from their house, he says he thinks between 1970 and 1994, it shrunk to 1/9 of what it had been. Most kids are not going out of their houses at all. They're staying inside, playing with video games, playing with technology. One little boy he quoted as saying he referred to playing indoors, what he wanted to play indoors because that's where all the electrical outlets are.
Well, see, I can remember my sister getting in arguments with my parents because they wouldn't let her do anything. And she'd see me at the age of 6 and 7 on my bicycle and clear on the other side of town.
Right, exactly.
Explore.
Right. Jonas and I are about the same age. In fact, I'm only a few days older than he is. And we remember that when we were kids, our parents hustled us out of the house. First minute we could get out after breakfast, we came back in for lunch, which was a rushed affair if we didn't pack something to go take off to the woods or to the playground. We came back in at dinner time, and then we came back in at night when Mom usually got Dad after us because we weren't listening to her yell it was time to come in. And then we went to bed and we were right back out again the next day. So that's not the experience that kids have today.
No, definitely not.
What was your experience? You're a couple, you're almost almost 3 decades younger than
30.
me.
I'm 30. So, I guess, I grew up as a kid in the 80s. So, and I was from out in the country, so there was no excuse. So the greenery was all around us. We had a good acre or two, but I'd go down to the creek and, play, and play whatever. But for me, it was very isolated because we were out in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't get anywhere. I wasn't allowed to leave the driveway with my bike, so maybe that's where it started in that kind of time period.
Why were you not able to leave? What was that?
Mostly distrust for the other people on the road. Finally, I was able to go down our road to my grandmother's, which was, 2 houses down.
Did you live in a rural area?
Yeah, very rural area up in Mercer County, around Pontoon Lake. So we are, I think, to this day, the last dirt road in the county. So, I mean, that still doesn't have cable, barely has, if you can call it, high-speed internet. So there's a lot of excuses to get outside. And even as it is, I think I found myself, I don't know if I had an affinity for technology. Obviously, I'm doing the internet stuff here. But I watched whatever was on our 3 channels of TV for the most part.
So you're an anomaly.
Am I an anomaly?
For your age,
yeah, is that it?
For sure, yeah. I mean,
okay.
My father grew up in Keokuk, Iowa. And I remember taking train trips with him to visit his dad there, and it was a Coke for 5 cents.
Wow.
And the steam engine that took us down there, right when diesels were coming about. So, Yeah, back in those days, I mean, the highlight of my afternoon was like packing a lunch, climbing the tree, and sitting out and watching and listening and looking up from up above like a cat on a perch. What's going on?
Mm-hmm. And it's not that I didn't explore. I mean, we had a nice hollow out back. I got to walk down, who knows, property, and stuff like that. But maybe that was about the time, is it? It feels like, and I see this with my wife too. She was very rural, almost more rural than me, than in Western New York, and I know she had a very I don't want to say sheltered, protective parents, I think, and I see that in her when we live in the city, in the Beachview neighborhood, and. To me, I see these kids, they are getting out to play because, they have small houses there, but they're in the middle of the street. That's where you have to go. This is their front yard. Yeah. And it's like, well, these people are used to this and comfortable with their kids going out. So you're
talking about them. Two issues here that he talks about in an interview he had back in 2006 with Grist. Is it Grist magazine? Yeah. He was asked, what's this about? Why is this happening to kids? Why are kids not interacting with nature? Why is nature something that they're separating themselves from? And the first thing we think of is access. They don't have any access to nature. And you're talking about that, in some suburban areas or in some city areas. There's not a lot of green. There's not a lot of places where kids can just go off and play without a lot of adult supervision. But his contention is that access is not as big an issue as we think. And you kind of implied this when you were talking about your experience in the rural area, because you had plenty of access to the outdoors. But what you also had was parental fear. And what he says is that's the number one issue, is parental anxiety, that something is going to happen to my kid if he or she goes out and plays without a lot of parental supervision. What would that be? Kidnapping. Someone's going to come and take my kid away. And his contention is that we've created that. That in some ways the media has created that. Think about that. If you turn on Fox News, for example, this whole situation of this little girl the murder trial of the mother supposedly was acquitted, but that was playing nonstop, constant. First there was the discovery of the child, then there was who did it, then there was mom got arrested, and then the trial, and now evaluating the trial and whether it was the right decision or not, just over and over and over and over. And this is what people are exposed to, so that we have the sense that the world is a very dangerous place and we have to protect our children from these monsters that are going to come and take them. But the reality is, he says, that the data shows that in the last couple of decades, kidnappings of children has decreased, and that the majority of kidnappings of children has always been a relative, a family member, usually in a dispute of custody.
So as they've realistically been decreased, the visibility has increased, and that's the problem. Right. I mean, we do see a lot of news, a lot of kind of scare tactic kind of journalism.
Exactly.
Every week almost you hear at least one news story about somebody trying to lure a child into the car or whatever.
Yeah. I was like, oh, those people are out there. And I really think that's something that that our parents have of my generation have kind of succumbed to. Is that my father grew up on a farm, he was all about going down to the stream and doing this and that, and to the point where he won't let me ride my bike into town 2 miles, I mean, it always perplexed me. And again, and I still see that general distrust of people, and I think it just watches the 24-hour news circle too much sometimes.
Exactly. The 24 hours news, and that's really the culprit, and that we've been conditioned to live in a state of fear. And this is before 9/11. Okay, this is starting in the 80s. You're talking about a time when there you were living surrounded by nature, with that fear keeping you from really indulging in the joys and the wonder of nature. What kind of an impact does that have on our kids? That's the question. What is nature deficit disorder doing to our children? And why do we care about that?
These days, you have people that have had the experiences. We have that very protective thing, and that's all we know.
Right.
And I'm not able to go into a situation where we live in the city and see these kids running around like, oh, those parents are crazy. They don't care about what's going to happen with their kids. In reality, it's like, this is the neighborhood. The neighborhood takes care of each other here.
Right. I happen to live in a small community that in some ways is like a community that time forgot. We have sidewalks. We have front porches. People are out. Kids are on the sidewalks, riding their big wheels, running around, drawing with sidewalk chalk, which he indicates in this interview that some communities have actually outlawed. Kids cannot draw with sidewalk chalk. The rain washes it off. It's graffiti. Training them to be graffiti. We don't want that. God forbid. But this community, kids are all over the place. When we first moved into this community about 22 years ago, when we had young children, there were 75 children in a 3-block area.
Wow.
You don't see that in a lot of places anymore. And now we're the old people on the block. You know, it's all turning around. These houses are being sold and young families are coming in, and we have about 75 people, kids now on a 3-block area. And the kids are out playing all the time. And we supervise each other's kids, making sure that they don't get into trouble. Now, they're not going off into the woods, but they are outside. And that's important. They look for butterflies. They check out what's under rocks. They're not afraid of insects. Okay. So this is something that I value, and I have a grandchild, a 14-month-old, who fortunately has 2 parents who were raised in nature and value nature and take him out, and he's out all the time, and I don't think it's going to be an issue for him. At least I hope not. But I get concerned about the rest of kids who get afraid of going outside, who do get afraid of an insect, who do get afraid of picking up a rock and seeing what's underneath it, who don't know where their food comes from because they've never seen a garden or never participated in growing anything.
I always wonder about that. Like I go around the city and realize some people have never left the city limits of Pittsburgh. Yeah. And it's like some of these people probably haven't seen a cow.
Absolutely.
And I could hear cows from my house.
Yeah.
In the morning, I hear them, a mile down the road if the wind's blowing the right way. And just this idea that they haven't really experienced that. Just blows my mind. All they've seen is people in concrete growing up.
And you ask, children, where does meat come from? And they say the grocery store.
Right.
Because they don't know. And what does it mean when we get cut off from the source of things in our life? When we get cut off from the source of food, we don't know, where it comes from. No.
My grandmother used to always say when I was coming up, if you're going to get a lady, get a country girl. Get a country girl. The city girls, no, they don't know the country. I was engaged to a young lady who grew up on a farm, and sure enough, birds and the bees. She taught me a lot.
All right, you're a father. You have a son. How is this impacting on your own family?
I sometimes wonder whether it was a curse or a blessing. I bought my son his first computer at the age of 8 when he was 13. Mm. And he's IQ of 159. He's a whiz kid. But it bothers me now because he sits at that thing 24/7.
Yeah.
24. The only time he'll get out is to go to the movies.
Mm. And I have that, doing my work. I pretty much live in it. That's my job, and I enjoy it. I love it. And I love these social interactions that happen on there. Mm. But it is sometimes like you need to get out.
Yeah.
And I find a struggle getting that because that is kind of my world. At least nowadays, things are portable enough I can take it out to the park with me. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
I don't know. It's
so what do you do with him? Do you get him outside? Do you ever go on trips, go biking or hiking or canoeing or anything like that?
When I was a few years ago, I worked for an organization called Inroads, which set up internships for talented minorities, and I used to always travel to these exotic places. And the director of the company of the region in the Pittsburgh area took a liking to my son, and that was probably the closest that we have been in terms of going out and discovering nature. And he'd be chasing squirrels, and other interns looking, "What's your son?" I guess, "Hey, he's having a ball. Leave him alone." He's discovering stuff. But I really did appreciate that time. I don't know if anything like that will ever happen again. But it was a very unique time.
Yeah. Yeah. So why do we care about this? I asked that a couple of times. Why should we care about, if our kids are safe, they're in the house, they're occupied, we don't have to worry about them?
They're safer on the computer. They're hopefully getting into it, and it'll be their job in the future, and they won't have to work in the steel mills like that did. Right.
Yeah.
But it's something about being whole as a person. You were talking before we started this conversation about where do you go? Where's your favorite place in terms of nature? I remember growing up in Chicago, 5 blocks from the lake. Whenever I got stressed out or just wanted to relax, I'd go sit on the rocks for hours on end and just look and listen. And it was very soothing.
There's a sense of wonder that you get when you're in nature. There's a sense of proportion you get when you're in nature and you realize that there's a lot more to life than you. There's a lot more to life than your needs and your desires and what excites you. There's an entire universe under a rock Okay, there's an entire universe above the clouds and the stars. How many of us can even sit out at night and see stars? There's so much light pollution where we live that we can't see them. Recently, my daughter was studying in Ithaca, and we went to visit her, and we camped out outside the house that she was living in, an old 125-year-old farmhouse, and we camped out. And the tent we had had one of those openings at the top so that you could see the sky. And there was no light pollution there. And I saw something that I hadn't seen since I was 9-10 years old when I lived in Texas, and that was 4 layers of stars. And I was so tired, I didn't want to close my eyes and go to sleep because I didn't want to stop seeing this, Most of our kids don't have that experience. We have to go out of our way. And who goes out of their way, at midnight to the woods someplace where they're far away enough from the city where they can see 4 layers of stars and shooting stars and identify constellations that we don't even remember existing.
I was lucky enough to be involved in scouting, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and those were some precious memories. Camp Wabaningo in the summer and climbing up in the Indiana Dunes and camping out and waking up in the morning, going looking for logs to start a fire and what you're going to cook and planning a menu. Do they still do that?
They do. I mean, I think the scouting is real. It's there. It's available for kids. But again, what do you hear people complain about and worry about with scouting? Somebody a scoutmaster who's going to abuse their kids. We're so tuned in to all the potential dangers. And of course, we're hardwired to do that. We know that neuroscience has taught us that our brains are wired to look for the dangers. It's how we survived. It's how our species has gone forward. And of course, that's an important thing to do. But we can get stuck there. And I think we have gotten stuck there. And we've given up a great deal. So one of the things that Richard Liff talks about is not only are those issues, but corresponding to this time period is a rise, an almost epidemic in what we call attention deficit disorder. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of controversy about attention deficit disorder and what causes it. And his contention is that this may be part of it, because what they discover is that when kids go out in nature and they're involved, they do better with attention. Okay. Not only, what is he saying here? Not only children, but here. There's something called the biophilia hypothesis. And in the studies that look at this, it shows that prisoners in prisons, people in infirmaries, and those who have a natural landscape view heal faster. And they've already discovered that, and they did some studies of people who are confined to intensive care units where there's lights all the time and noise all the time. When they are able to change the lights so that they reflect natural light throughout the day, and when there's something that people can look at, these are artificial windows, but actually have views that change with the light as that would during the day. It's not real, but people respond to it as if it is real, and they heal faster. So we know that being connected to nature, because we come from nature, we are nature, when we're connected to the source of ourselves, then we have a sense of wholeness, and that's not happening enough in our culture. So this is we're giving people medication, Ritalin, so that they can pay attention. But when we take them out into the woods, all of a sudden attention becomes a very different thing.
Mm. You were talking about observances in terms of nature and how they affect the healing. My last memory of my dad before he passed away was in the hospital. Mm. They were doing construction on the outside, a terrible view. There were jackhammers going on all around. The guy was cleaning the floor outside his room, and I'm thinking, this is not the way you want to spend your last hours. Yeah. But that's where he died. Yeah. That's sad.
Yeah. Really cut off.
Yeah.
Right. Cut off from his source and also from the people that were meaningful to him in his life.
As much as he loved nature, too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it affects all levels, not just children, but people throughout the life cycle who are feeling cut off. And there's an interesting thing he mentions as well, is that pediatricians are saying that they are not treating very many broken bones in kids anymore. Okay, what they're treating is repetitive stress injuries in children. Okay, the thumbs with the electronics and the games, and the stress injuries that come from sitting for long periods of time and focusing on a computer screen or a TV screen. And what they're saying is that these injuries generally last a lot longer, and some of them are permanent. Okay. How many of us broke bones when we were out playing? We fell off of something. We fell out of a tree. We tried to jump the rock in the creek and we fell on it instead. Yeah, kids will sometimes get hurt, but bones heal. Okay.
I was in Katanning 2 days ago, and I saw 4 black youth going down the street on skateboards. And I went, neat! Why wow, they're coming back.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that I wanted to mention about his book is there's a chapter in there called the criminalization of natural play. And we started to see that natural play is more and more restricted. I mean, think about when you were in school, and probably this is even true for you, Mike, when you were in school, you had recess before or after lunch, okay? And you had gym class every day. Okay, and gym class was a long class. It wasn't a 45-minute period. It was sometimes an hour and a half. Okay, so you actually went out and you played a game of soccer. Well, we did, but you played a game of field hockey, and then you went and took a shower. So this takes some time. So there's real exercise.
They didn't even have that when I was in school.
Okay, so by the 80s,
it was like a half an hour sometimes. It was usually the shorter period of the day for us.
Well, now it's not happening at all. School districts are having to cut programs, and what they cut are the arts, they cut music, and they cut physical education. Okay, so kids are often not able to go outside for recess, and if they do, they're in an asphalt playground. Okay, where they're supervised by adults.
Well, they do have that squishy material now.
Yes, right.
That's really
because
impressive.
God forbid someone fall down, break a bone, or skin themselves.
No, just bounce right off the floor. It's fine.
And so a lot of the criminalization of natural play, again, is fear-based. It's about making sure that kids don't get hurt. All right, or that there's no litigation that can come along. We're afraid of getting sued. So if we own property, we want to make sure kids don't hurt themselves on that property. All right. So look at playgrounds. Playgrounds, you have the squishy stuff, and certainly we don't want our children to get hurt. But getting hurt and discovering what gravity really does, and that's not always your friend, is an important thing to learn.
I did a documentary called The Healthy Class of 2010 where we followed a bunch of students who were in the Pittsburgh public schools for 4 years until they graduated in 2010 last year. And Mark Roosevelt was the superintendent at the time. He was interviewed, and he said, one of the things I'd like to do is create a system where we have a reporting system. It could be grading them for a nature class. How much do they exercise? How much mental health affirmation are they getting from their activities? And I thought that was brilliant, and it's a shame we didn't stick around to fulfill that desire.
Yeah, it was a good idea, and hopefully someone will pick up on that. The other thing that we were talking about, and that I think maybe we can think about wrapping up with, is the spiritual aspect of this deficit disorder. What does it mean when children are not exposed to the kind of wonder that is available when we are in nature? What happens to us as citizens of the world when we don't have a sense of wonder? And what Love thought when he first started to talk about this is that he might get into trouble with some conservative Christians over the idea of nature worship. But what he found was just the opposite, that even very conservative Christians like the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary from there understood that one's spirituality is grounded in connection with nature. And so we're not having the kinds of problems with this ideologically that you might think that we do. So what can we do about this? How do we get kids back into nature so that they understand where they came from? And if we don't, what's the implication for the way we live in the world? Are we going to care about the other animals that share the planet with us? Are we going to care about the planet as anything but a select set of resources that we can use and dispose of whenever we want to?
I think what inner cities are trying to do in terms of bringing people back in terms of longevity and making them part of the community downtown is to build bike paths and do other things environmentally. And if adults start doing that, their children will pick up on it, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think that's a positive move.
I think Pittsburgh is a very lucky city, and in lots of ways we're at the epicenter of this kind of movement. We're certainly at the epicenter of the green movement. That's something that Pittsburgh takes very seriously and has done very well with. We have the wonderful bike paths, the work that's been done around the riverfronts and the shores so that people can have access to the river, both for boating and walking along, and biking is very exciting. So I think we are making progress. We also are very blessed in the Pittsburgh area with many parks, with many fabulous parks. There are parks, the Rachel Carson Trail, which, for example, which can take you into areas that seem like you're out in the middle of nowhere, but you're really only right over the hill from a major housing development. So we've got some amazing natural resources here. And people use them. If you go out into the parks, you do see people. I don't see as many kids out there as I would like to see. And I think we do need to work on that. We need to figure out how to help parents get their kids outside outside. Turn off the technology for a day, for an evening. We talked before about helping parents to bring kids to the dinner table so they could have a family experience of eating together. What about a family experience of enjoying nature together? Deciding that one evening a week, one day a week, we're going to turn off the technology and we're going to go outside. No matter what the weather is, we're going to explore what it means to live grounded in the world and use all of our senses to experience that wonder that is a spiritual necessity if we're going to live in this world as grounded human beings.
I think one way we're probably going to have to try to find a way to tie the technology into the nature aspect, whether it's using iPhones or whatever for information if you're doing a walking tour or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And you're seeing that. You're seeing that actually. Yeah. I mean, they're using runners are using their iPhones to track how far they've gone. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're being used for health. I mean, there's a technology coming up called excuse me at the moment, augmented reality, where you hold up, say, your iPhone, and right now it's used for I can find the nearest pizza place by me, but that can be obviously turned around to you can go out on the trail. It's going to have your GPS, global positioning, and you'll be able to go on this trail and move your phone up and you say George Washington was here,
or hey, look, there's some fabulous butterflies over here. Come and see this.
And that can be an interesting thing that they can crowdsource. That people go on trail, hey, there's this caterpillar hanging over here, and if you come a week later, is he still there?
Is it still there?
I mean, it can create that, make that even broader, and hopefully enhance it and bring those people out to it.
So what you're saying is it's not a choice between technology and nature. We have to think about ways to use technology to help us stay connected with
It can
nature.
be an enabler, perhaps. But and then beyond that, it is a responsibility. You used to say the TV's the babysitter. Now Halo's the babysitter. The Xbox is the babysitter. Whatever, the internet. The internet needs a babysitter. So I mean, it is how invested you are, and do the parents have those values to pass by? And it's going to be really hard, I think, coming through that generation, that several generations that have had that fear factor to turn them around.
And I think that's why this interests me so much. As a therapist, I deal with fear. I deal with trying to help people overcome fears of all kinds, and this is certainly an important fear that we need to overcome. The world has dangers in it, absolutely. And our brain is not uniquely, we're like most other animals, capable of discerning danger and developing tactics of avoiding that. And we need to be careful. That's not something we're saying we don't need to do. But we also need to recognize that the world is a wonderful place and a safe place. And we need to get out in it and enjoy it.
I think that's a good point to wrap up on. And thank you, Tirzah. Thank you, Jonas, for joining us here. We're going to have, hopefully, a lot more of these, and everybody can find out. We're at Seclair.com. You can check out a blog where everybody writes at Seclair.com/blog. Also find us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. There's plenty of stuff out there. All that's linked from the site. Thank you, and we'll see you guys next time on Doc Talk.